Hello and welcome. Good afternoon. You're with the Times of India, and I'm Ashutosh Sinha. Today, the Times of India and the Institute of Management Technology presents Making Agile Leaders of Tomorrow. Over the next 90 minutes or so, we'll be talking about various aspects of the topic. And for the MBA students, the aspiring tomorrow's business leaders who are listening to us, it is a great opportunity to listen to some of the business leaders who will be joining us. You wouldn't want to miss it for anything if you're an MBA aspirant or already studying in one of those MBA institutions. So just why is this so important? Well, it boils down, as I'd like to put it, at least for the moment, boils down to just one big word, and that's change. If there's one word that is a constant, it has to be that. So naturally, during these pandemic ravaged times, the impact of the change is being felt, should we say, with a vengeance. Remote working is here to stay and needs a completely different set of skills for those looking to join the workforce. How does the aspiring manager of tomorrow make good of that kind of an opportunity in the challenging times that we are in? Many of those jobs that we see today, they would become redundant tomorrow. Again, something to make note of and keep an eye on. New technologies are rapidly replacing older jobs with new and more technology intensive and more knowledge intensive jobs as well. The role itself is turning like that. In addition, global exposure is also being considered as one of the vital components of a holistic and comprehensive learning process. That brings me to an old dictum I learned in conversation with some venture capital firms. Never let a crisis go waste. For what you can learn during a crisis, you can never learn otherwise. So, if you as a viewer have questions, well, my suggestion would be to put them in the Q&A tab for the experts who'll join us in just a bit. So we'll be joined by a number of these leading voices across industries. Dr. Urmi Chatterjee, Vice President, HR at Honeywell, APAC. Sumit Naran, President, Pro Biking, Bajaj Auto. Narayanan Ramaswamy, Partner and Head, Education and Skill Development Practice. They'll all be joining in a bit. He's KPMG in India, and Dr. Vishal Talwar, Director at IMT Ghaziabad. They'll all be joining in just a bit. But, so when you have to listen to them, how can students, and as I said, aspiring managers make good of the opportunity? So first, let me introduce you to Deepak Ori, Chief Executive Officer, Lebua Hotels and Resorts, who's joining all the way from sunny Bangkok. Deepak, welcome. It must be warm there and you must be really enjoying the weather.
Yes, Ashu, thank you. And first of all, many happy returns of the day.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you. So let's get down to the business and let's start with the conversation then.
Sure, please.
Okay, so these are tough times. If you're able, if you're one of those who tends to think in a linear way, these could be challenging times. What are the biggest challenges for young MBA graduates and those aspiring to be business managers? They're looking to get into one of the MBA institutions.
Okay, so MBA for me and for many people is the future of the generation, future of the world, future of the century. And like you said, never let a crisis go waste. And this is where we need great minds to think that what could be the way forward. Now for MBA aspirants, there are many people in different parts of the world, they want to do MBA. Some have the reasons to get a good job. And most of the people, they want to change the thing. My request to all the aspirants is that MBA gives you a basic platform, but it teaches you how to think differently. And how to think differently, and your thought process is always going to be a winner in the future. And I'll give you one example. Sure. I think in this 2 years, like you were talking about pandemic, we have learned quite a lot. We have learned everything. There were many projections that were done, but we never, we looked at the quantitative part. We saw those projections, but we forgot to look at the qualitative part. And maybe it is after 100 years, something like that has happened. So we were not ready for that. And we were not ready in this century is a biggest letdown for all the business leaders, including us. Okay. Now there are two problems that are looming over right now where we need creative minds to come with the solutions. One is a problem that I would say, or a challenge, is a short-term challenge, is the Great Resignation, a term used by Dr. Anthony from Texas A&M University. And the second is that the next century, what we are going to see is the rate of population, which is going to again affect the labor force. Many people have their predictions. We have said that the IT is going to come, or the robots are going to take over. The artificial intelligence is the future. I still believe the future lies with people like us, and natural intelligence can never be marginalized, and that is the future. The future lies with people. IT, there are two kinds of forecasters. I'm the type 2. The type 1 forecaster is they don't know. The second type forecaster are the people who don't know that they don't know. So I'm the type 2 that I have no idea, but still I would like to forecast. I think that people business is going to come back. And why people business is going to come back is during this pandemic, two important things that we should know. Every country in the world, everybody was saying that the hospitality business is down, which is, of course, because when people are not traveling, the hotel, airlines, the tourism business is going to be affected. But the most interesting observation is the attrition rate of employees. In the hospitality related business, minus airline is 11%. Airlines is the lowest, 5%. The highest is in retail. And number 2 is software business, the attrition rate. Second very important thing that has come, which has shown the weakness, is that the people cannot stay longer in a company which likes to innovate. Now, I'll give you 3 examples in 3 different industries. So airline Boeing, the attrition rate is 5%, SpaceX, 21%, HSBC, 6%, Goldman Sachs, 15.5%. So you see these kind of differences that are coming that clearly shows that people are afraid to innovate. And why they are afraid to innovate, it comes back again to MBA and MBA aspirants and the curriculum, is that we are not on the ground. We are not with the industry people. I really like this panel, and not because it's your birthday or giving you a gift, because you have got the industry people from different verticals down to talk about the future of MBAs and MBA aspirants. And it's the industry people with a lot of experience talking about it. I think it's a great initiative. And this initiative has to go to the classrooms also. And if I have to advise the education ministry in India, I'm going to make such a bold statement. I think there has to be one denominator for the entrance into the MBA schools, and that should be GMAT. I'm not trying to promote a foreign company, but you can't expect a student to study for CAT and GMAT and the other schools. What it is going to do, GMAT is, it is going to put all our schools on a world-class level. That is where it is going to show that at what level India is playing. Yeah, please, Ashu.
Very, very interesting the way you've raised it. And you know why I think it's very interesting also, because what you said just a little while ago, you spoke about the qualitative MBA as well, and also referred to the people business. So is it going to be the demand from people, the demand from the aspiring MBA students that's going to drive that inching closer towards GMAT or that kind of an exam?
I think this is the initiative we have to take as an industry, and the educational institutions, they have to take, because then what we do is the workload over the students is reduced, so they prepare for one exam. Second thing is, what it is going to do is, giving an example, say a institute called A Institute, The entrance cutoff is 740. So automatically at a world level, we have already shown that this is the level the Indian students are playing. Okay, and this is what it is going to do in the future is that many of the talent that is going overseas will stay back because people like to stay with their own tribe. Okay, second thing, what is going to happen is that most of the private institutions that are charging high fees, they will come under pressure because if their cutoff is 500 in India, in city B, city C, or whatever, they will not be able to charge those kind of fees, and it will be a pressure on the academics. That is, a lot of professors, they do not want to change. They do not want to bring experiential learning because they have to change, they have to adapt. And when these things will happen, the quality of the students that are going to come out into the workforce will have a greater process knowledge. They will have a knowledge how to process the data and how to handle the situation that we were and we are still into. I hope we are coming out of it. And this is going to create a better world for tomorrow.
Also, so you use the word data. That is a new beast that is emerging. We are learning how to use data. We are learning how to generate data through processes and systems. Do institutions also need to recognize its importance and plan ahead for the manager of tomorrow?
I think institutes, they do teach in their marketing curriculum data. But what the world has seen in the practical side is the correlation. We lack the correlation. See, we get the data quantitative, we got the data qualitative. Long time back, and still automobile industries, I think maybe Sumit may talk about it. Automobile industries, they use a technique called conjoint, a tangible trade-off. That is a mix of quantitative, qualitative data, and then you see which model of car has to come. If we would have used a correlation, I think we would be in a very different situation and the world would be in a very different situation. And point to make here is that this gentleman, the professor who started this term called the Great Resignation, actually did it qualitatively. The quantitative data was giving a very different signal. And the figures in terms of the attrition rate, I gave it to you, is a mix of qualitative and quantitative. It is how you think about it. So it is not the first point before collecting data is how you think about it. And how you think about it is what we need to prepare our future leaders in the classroom and the MBA aspirants. And when these MBA aspirants, they go out, it's not which school they have come from, whether that school has a ranking number 1 or ranking number 100, it doesn't matter. What matters is their thought process. And over a period of time, exposure takes over the education. But in the beginning of a career, education is must.
So can you highlight, Deepak, also some real life scenarios that can demonstrate how does one maintain the challenges, how does one live up to the challenges now that we are seeing, and ensuring that they are thinking differently while undergoing the regular education and then perhaps the MBA education as well.
Okay, so we have certain MBAs who work with us. So what we did, that we said during COVID, we will not let any people resign. I mean, not resign, we will not fire anybody. We didn't fire anybody. But still, 40% of our workforce resigned.
Oh.
Now they didn't resign to go to the hospitality industry. And that is where the MBA students came up with a great idea that what they are lacking is that they need confidence. Their confidence is completely shaken. The culture, because our organization has a culture of innovation. When you are innovating things, when you are improvising things, it gives a lot of insecurity to people who do not think with that frame of mind. I'm also the chairman of the board at the Florida International University, and we are starting an entrepreneurship and an innovation center. And the basic concept of starting that center is to train people to create a job security while being in the innovative industry. So we saw a reality, and then suddenly when we started working towards the cultural thing, giving the security to the people, Our resignations have actually dropped, I would say, in single digit today. So the difference is sometimes we are taking one right step, but we are not able to see the future. So the MBA students can see that, you know what, we do this, that is what we are doing, but we still not giving the job security. Our culture is still giving them a lot of insecurity. Let's work on these things, and that will change the people's behavior. So this is what we are working. And the three factors that is going to change the future is the culture of the organization. The culture of the organization, and it is not my word, it is a word I have seen and I've read from one of the journals, business journal, is a toxic culture. That is going to make sure that the organization, the attrition rate is higher. Second thing is the job security in an innovative organization. Many organizations wants to be innovative, but how do you retain your people? And that is where the human resource has to come up with the new techniques, and HR is going to be the future. People are going to be the future, and 2030 and beyond, Ashu will be seeing a new world. That's what I'm going to say.
Wow, that sounds like a lot of promise to the youngsters. So it's about them to build that world and shape it. If that is going to be that, or if that is how we expect it to change. So what will your advice be to the younger generation MBA graduates?
Okay, I'll give an advice, but I want to say something. I'm very impressed with the younger generation. And that's why I said, let me go and do something and interact with them. And I give you a very recent example. We had the ambassador of a Central European country visit with one of the universities from Central Europe. And this young lady asked the ambassador a question, that what is the difference between your generation and our generation? And the ambassador answered, for our time, it was a duty. Your time, it is a right. Brilliant answer. Now we have to listen to what the girl said. It is something that was given to you on a platter in your time. We have to fight for it. And the ambassador asked what? She said privacy. In today's world. So I think what needs to change now, the advice to the MBA students is, I always tell them, do MBA. If you can't get into a regular MBA, get online MBA. Do the evening class. Do it with the experience. Not because you need that title as a MBA, because MBA you're doing because you are able to process your mind, to change your thought process, to make your thought process sharper. And that is what is very important in today's world. That will be my advice. And my advice to all of us who are in my age group, I think I'm the oldest in today's panel, is that we need to change. We need to embrace this change. We can never say that in our generation it was like this, because that what that girl said, it was a brilliant answer. They don't have the privacy. The context changes over a period of time, and that's what is so critical. So when you see that, if you can give a short answer, when you see the changes that are happening, what is the biggest hope that you see, apart from the youngsters who you said you're very impressed with? The hope I want to see, and that's my second book I'm writing, the glass house syndrome will cease to exist. A glass house syndrome is that when you are in your prime, like 40s and 50s, and you're at the top of the career, that is where you got always, most of the people get insecure. And this young generation moving forward will remove that, because they are very confident and they're looking at things in a very different manner. I think we should be out to support them, because that will also improve our time, and we will, and our future generation will live in a very beautiful and amicable world.
Okay, Deepak, thank you so much for your time. It's been wonderful speaking to you and speaking about the future, because it concerns the youth and it concerns us all, because the youth are going to drive us all to a brighter future in the 21st century. Thank you indeed. So thanks, Deepak, and we'll catch up again very soon.
Sure. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. So let's move on. So we were talking to Deepak Kohri, the CEO of Lebua Hotels and Resorts. And remember, we're talking in the context of, Making the Agile Leaders of Tomorrow. This is a presentation of the Times of India and the Institute of Management Technology. So let's move ahead. And as I promised, there'll be a set of very senior business leaders who'll be joining us. So let's welcome Dr. Urmi Chatterjee, Vice President HR, Honeywell APAC. Sumit Narang, President, Pro Biking, Bajaj Auto. Narayanan Ramaswamy, Partner and Head, Education and Skill Development Practice, KPMG in India. And Dr. Vishal Talwar, Director, IMT Ghaziabad. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us on the platform. First, if I can request Narayanan, if you can just take a few minutes and set the context for the conversation.
Thank you, Ashutosh. Thank you so much. And thanks, Times Group, for this absolutely wonderful and contextual discussions that we're going to have today. I'm delighted that, I'm in this position, like where I'm going to talk to you very briefly about what's the need, what's the essential, what's the change that is happening because of which, we need to be so agile. So in short, I see three big trends. Right. The first trend that all of us know, this has been happening before the pandemic. It got accelerated during the pandemic, which is what I call as the pervasive and intrusive technology. People call it by different names, Industry 4.0, whatever name, the digital technologies and others. Look at what it is doing. There is not a sector that has not changed because of this technology, right? Look at what's happening to, the regular retail shop that we do. That's all completely gone, online. Or take banking. Once upon a time, Deepak talked about age, and all of us know something called a branch of a bank. Current generation doesn't even know what is a branch of a bank. It doesn't exist for them. Or for that matter, take entertainment. Many of them don't know what is it to be in the front row and whistle for a movie, because that's not there. It's OTT. And the radios and other things are gone. So an automobile, 70% of automobile is non-moving parts. I never thought a day will come where automobile will have more non-moving parts. Things of that kind. So every single sector is changing. So one of the biggest change that is happening is pervasive and intrusive technology. What is the change there? Right? You talked about, Ashutosh, data, but I have 4 more D's to add to data. Data is definitely one. But along with that, what is changing and what is important for us to realize is digital, which I spoke about. Design. This design in education, design in thinking is going to be very important. And demand-based, thinking. That it's not just your design, but are you reacting fast enough? The last but not the least is delivery. So the thinking and how do you harness this technology is going to be very important. That's my first thing. Are you in sync with the technology that is happening, which is going to be a big change? The second thing that I see changing is, Deepak, talked a lot about this, and I'm going to touch upon this, which is the changing mindset of employer and employee. And that change is rather sweeping, and it has accelerated over the past few years. And let me tell you what are those changes. And for the beginning, to begin with, the employers now want people who know how to adapt very quickly. So what does that mean? Rather than learning what to do, we need to learn what to learn and how to learn. So the institutes now have a very different role. Are you teaching people how to learn quickly, and how do you learn, with the available resources? That's one. Second, multiplicity of skills. It's not enough, and it's multitasking all over. Every single job role is going to ask for not just one skill, but multiple skills. Are you prepared? Third, which is increasingly coming out, and Deepak talked about culture, is the emotional quotient. How many of you, perseverance seems to be, if I were Darwin today, and I would say perseverance of the fittest, what helps for those to be surviving is perseverance. And what is your emotional quotient? How are you going to survive? And the fourth and fifth trend that I see in this changing mindset, which is interesting for me too, is one, people in the previous generation worked for the employer. They were loyal. My dad worked for an organization 42 years. I can't even think of it. I'm perhaps loyal to a profession. But increasingly, there are youngsters who want a higher purpose. Forget the profession, forget the employer. Is there a higher purpose for that? But at the same time, the fifth trend, which is instant gratification, is also equally coexisting. That's okay, I have a higher purpose, but Am I happy today? Am I happy to go to the office next week? So those are the changes that I see on the emotional or on the mindset of people. The third one, which is equally important, and the trend that I see is the globalization that is happening in not just our education, as well as in the job roles, in the jobs, in the skill sets that is required. And why is that happening? Please understand that the world is getting geriatric. In the 8 billion odd population that we have, many countries are getting older and older, right? And India, that way, is so very different. We're just passing through the demographic bulge. We're going to go through it for the next 40 years. So we're going to have a much younger population. What does that mean? That we are going to support the world. By 2030, one of our studies says 1/3 of the world's working age population is going to be from India or of Indian origin. That means unless we have a global mindset, we are not creating winners. Are we having people who are going to support the globe? Gone are those times we work for Indian industry, Indian requirement, and Indian assessment. Most of who are going to study now in MBA schools are going to serve the globe. Are we ready for it? And hence the global requirements, we need to understand the global requirements. We need to understand global assessments. And as MBA students, I think we should also start networking globally. And networking is something that we all practice. And hence the implications I would see for an MBA institute would be as follows. And I think Deepak put it very well. MBA is something that would change the thought process. Are we changing? Because the change in thought process will come only when we change as an institution to adapt to the new order. So I would think with these as the trends and compulsions that are there, as an MBA institute, are we geared up to prepare leaders of tomorrow? Are we geared to prepare leaders who are going to be agile and adapt and be successful in the world that's waiting for us?
Okay. So you end with that point about being agile, and that's what I'd like to first maybe take it to Sumit and talk about the agility part, because of that emphasis on that word of agility, and because of what we spoke about, the need to learn and what to learn, even how to learn. What would you say about the need to give this importance to agility? Partly, I would imagine, forced because of the pandemic. Sumit.
Yeah, thanks, Ashu. Yeah, I think that's one phrase in the management and leadership circle that's become really popular over the last about 5 odd years. Agility, not something that used to be talked about so much in the past. I think we have to realize that, we've all grown management education and practices based on age-old case studies. And in India, we've often looked westwards and found even 20-year-old case studies being quite relevant. And I think all of that was still working well because there was a certain degree of stability in business and trends could be drawn out. Of course, the last few years have shown us that VUCA, which was just a nice fancy term, is pretty much life for all of us every day. And the last 2 years, if nothing else, have shown us that if you can't live in a VUCA world, you better hang your boots. So I think agility to me is one of the mindsets that every young leader's got to step into the working world with. Deepak put it up very well when he talked about that, a lot of MBA students, they add a lot of value by thinking creatively, thinking differently. I think what a management education has often helped people and build very good careers is not as much the skill sets, but the mindset, the attitude and the mindset they've gone out with. And I think that at that mindset of change, of agility, of failing fast, learning long, is going to be a very big change factor in the coming years. So that's something which I would really like young managers to embrace. When we talk of long term, to me, that long term has become an academic concept. It's so difficult to even set in place the KRAs for your team for a full year.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody sitting out here has much of a clue in our respective world and businesses what a year down the line would be like. So what are we talking about? I would say agility, for agility to bring in, I think somewhere people have to change their frame of reference on time. I think long-term is a concept. Long-term is just a sum of some glorious medium terms. And that's what I would like a lot of young people to think about. And really speaking, that's what worries them today. And if there are many of the people in the audience over here right now, I think they're most interested about what's going to be happening next year when they step into the industry, their first 2 years, 3 years, 5 years on the outer side. And I think when you look at time period at a short period like this, as opposed to as opposed to a lifelong commitment to a particular profession, I think your whole ability to act fast changes quite a bit. There's no question there is this change that's happening. It might be a change for most of us. But then, like what I was reading somewhere, 50% of the global workforce is the Gen Y. Now, when young people are stepping into the working world, I wonder who's going to be feeling more at home, them or people who have been in the working class for a long time. So I think while what one talks about as the new normal, the changing world, I think this is something where the young people have an advantage. They can really ride the wave. They're stepping into a time where this change is a part of life. They don't have a past comparison period to go by. I think all of this, to my mind, would really help them become way more agile managers.
Okay, that's one part of the agility part, and something that I'd like to come to Dr. Urmi and Dr. Vishal on this. First, Urmi, this is something that bothers. Women are dropping out of the workforce, and that data tells you that. As much as I get troubled with that kind of a data, seeing that kind of a data for for sheer, for a whole variety of factors, does the present situation give the women an option to reskill themselves to prepare for the tomorrow better, the women who will come into the workforce in the days ahead?
Yes, Ashu. I mean, I think, most organizations, when they are looking at flexibility today, they are keeping all kinds of workforce in mind. And believe me, maybe 20 years back, the generation Y or the Z was not the ones we were thinking would need that balance and flexibility. We were thinking that more women would need it. But today, the priorities of the Generation Z is also very different. So they are the ones also who are asking equal flexibility, and it's just not that only women are the ones who are asking for it. However, given the circumstances, and like you said, data kind of pushes it, the organizations have also gone forward and done a lot of things. I mean, there's a lot more that we need to do. But I'll just give an example from in Honeywell. A couple of years back, we launched a program called Reconnect. So what we felt was that this whole period of, when a woman goes out of work and maybe goes through a maternity period and comes back, they're completely disconnected from the whole organization. So when they come back, not only the skill is one part of it, that do we need to upskill them, reskill them? The other part of it is they also suddenly, things have changed. Today's organizations in 2 years, the whole structure changes. You may have acquired another organization into the same business. So how do we really make them feel comfortable in this whole period that they were out maybe for 8-9 months? And so we started a buddy system where the buddy kind of connects, to the employee overall throughout this period. Not very intrusive, because we wanted to be also conscious that women may not want the organization to call up 10 times and talk about things, but at least 2 things. One is being in touch with them and telling them the bigger change is happening at an org level and that they need to do so that they don't. And number 2, what you said was the reskilling part of it. So when they come back, the conversation is more about what is it you want to do now, not about what you left and went, because sometimes people come and say, I want to do something less stressful. I want to do something with less travel. So I think organizations have started to realize and tweaking their policies, the benefits, and the way they look at talent. But from a flexibility point of view, I see that it's something everybody is asking today. This is just not about, being men or women, some generation. It's something that people feel that they need to have that balance in life.
Sure. Very valid point. Not just about women. Just to remind, in case you want your questions, I see some questions are beginning to come in. So in case you want your questions answered by the experts here, please put them into the Q&A tab and we'll try and address some of those questions. We'll try and take as many questions. Okay, so coming to Dr. Vishal now. So the same question to you from a management institution perspective. How do we prepare? And again, to widen that question, as Umi mentioned, not just for the men, not just for the women, but also for the men. How do we go about ensuring that they are ready for tomorrow, more tuned to the needs of tomorrow?
So Ashu, there's been a sea change in terms of how businesses are managed, are governed. And I think Sunit was talking about the fact that you can't plan for a year, 2 years. And in fact, I was at another webinar listening to someone, and that gentleman from the FMCG industry said we plan month to month now. So that actually tells you that there's a lot of things that business schools also have to kind of unlearn, relearn in what they are inculcating within the students, the participants. And quite frankly, coming back to the earlier point about the MBA program and why it's useful, a management program actually is a combination of domain-specific knowledge as well as a lot of holistic skills. So if I look at the kind of skills that are currently required, certain amount of meta skills, as they call it, feeling, seeing, dreaming, making, learning, all these are things that you actually require to be able to make a success of yourself as far as a career is concerned. Automatically, what you also notice is, and if I pick up a few things from, let's say, from leadership during COVID times, if you look at this whole idea of empowering at the local level, being daring, being experimental, shortening the feedback cycle, publicly acknowledging uncertainties, a lot of these things are essentially part and parcel of new styles of leadership. And I think if you look at the combination of courses that are new age, that are progressive, modern, business school system does, is actually able to inculcate a lot of all this. So it's not just about the meta skills. If you look at how management education is moving, management education is actually moving in the direction of management, of course, but technology is coming to the core. So how do you work with technology? How do you work with others? How do you work with yourself or self-management? All these concepts are something that management, if I look at it from a multidisciplinary perspective, is actually ready. All management schools or all management curriculum, I'm not too very sure. I think it largely depends on how a management curriculum has been able to, let's say, integrate with the industry, how it's been able to make, change the content, how the content is delivered. A lot of the progressive curriculums have been able to deconstruct and bring in this element, and that also includes the agility aspect that you were actually talking about.
Very interesting. So, because, for sure, the kind of people who are listening to us on, various platforms, whether it's Zoom that we're talking, or whether it's IMT webinar, or, TimeStream, the Times of India Facebook page, all these platforms which people are listening to it, there's one thing, and, Dr. Talwar, I'd like to ask you for that. There is a certain sense of people wanting to do things on their own. You talked about the times, how they've brought out the kind of leadership. There's also the entrepreneurial skills that people, that has come out, that has come to the fore during these times. Can you explain this change in mindset? Is it only because of the pandemic, or was it already building and you see that happening or coming to the fore now?
So I think this whole idea of flexibility in what you would like to do, this flexibility in where you would like to venture, how would you like to experiment, is something that has always been there. The underpinnings, it's been possibly a little latent, but with, in the last 2 years, it's now been expressed a little bit more. Is it because of the fact that you realize that a lot of business models are working, other business models are not? What is it about uncertainty about careers? Whatever it is, I think there's a greater influence of wanting to at least test the waters as far as entrepreneurial orientations are concerned. And I think at the same time, if you notice, a lot of self-respecting management schools have also realized that by and large, a lot of the industry connections or a lot of the industry relationships have been largely around fulfilling their placement cycles, or but quite frankly, I think it can go much beyond that, to be honest. A lot of students are thinking in terms of not just being part of the workforce, not just being part of, let's say, being job consumers, but also seeing whether they can possibly look at being job producers as well. Having said that, what you also have to remember is that you have to kind of reinforce certain confidence in them. You have to be able to give them a fallback option of sorts. Having said that, a lot of people actually say, the accelerators and incubators say that if you have a plan B, that means you don't necessarily have a startup plan. But having said that, I think a lot of educational institutions are looking at it in this direction. They're trying to, create working incubation centers. They're trying to create a mentoring process. They're trying to possibly look at deferred placement schemes so that you are able to create a little bit of what I would call as aspiration in the students' minds over a period. If you have an idea, let's work towards it. If you have a particular thing that you may have done possibly as an engineer or a non-engineer, can you bring this ahead? Can you work on this in these 2 years? Don't just look at classroom education. Let's look outside the classroom education. How do you shape the journey outside the classroom? And in this case, I'm talking about innovation, incubation, startups. I think a lot of this will then contribute to a higher level of higher percentage of students wanting to venture on their own. I'm also not denying the fact that there's certain programs that are on right now, which also helps you and creates a certain kind of trigger in your mind. Just to take an example, possibly, I don't know, there are many events around, there's more incubation around, there's even a Shark Tank for that matter. So a lot of these things will, in the slightly longer term, enable a lot more of what I would call as aspiration and dreaming beyond job consumption.
Okay, so since we spoke about that, the idea of people wanting to become entrepreneurs, there's a question from Krishna. Maybe Narayanan, if you can take this. The question seems very simple. Do we need an MBA to succeed as an entrepreneur? And, it just reminds me of a line I heard Kishore Biani, the founder of Future Group say. He says, I'm not from any MBA institutions, but there is something that I've created. Is it very individualistic? What would you put it as?
Well. See, this has been a classic question. Everybody they ask, is entrepreneurship taught, or is it something that is inborn that can't be taught? And more importantly, can an MBA school really teach entrepreneurship? Because there are many who say, MBA schools are only for job seekers and not for job creators. That's the general norm. Let me put it this way. MBA institutes have changed significantly since the time they were set up in US as an institution for, applying for jobs and creating whatever and all those things. So the needle has moved a lot in terms of what does it mean, management education. And there are many who right from day one in a management institute start thinking of what should I do when I set up my own venture, right? Like, is it the financing aspect of it? Is it managing people? Is it managing technology? Is it just networking with people and a whole bunch of stuff? So to answer your question, do you need an MBA or not to be an entrepreneur? Perhaps you don't need it, but you learn it the long and hard way. An MBA and a good MBA is something that will capsulize these learnings that life can teach you over a period of time and equip you better for becoming an entrepreneur. So in a different sense, if I use a cliche, it could be a necessary but not a sufficient condition to be an entrepreneur. So if you are a student of an MBA and a good MBA institute, it definitely helps. But is it good enough for you to know? Maybe you need a lot more than that. That's why, like Dr. Talwar said, MBA institutes can create that environment and create that, and it's easier today than it was a few years before to create that. There are more and more people, nothing else, just out of curiosity, come and say, I want to be an entrepreneur. Let me be honest. There are many people who we lost in KPMG. And, surprisingly, not many of them joined competition. Not even what we call as industry. They all want to be entrepreneurs. They said either they joined a startup or they want to, do their own startup because they want. So it's easier today for an MBA institute to create more entrepreneurs. But I believe while MBA will definitely accelerate the process, there is something lot more than that that makes a successful entrepreneur.
Oh, it does. It does take quite a bit of challenge and ready to face hardships. There's another question. This one comes from Justina, and Justina writes, how can industry take the right steps so that the representation of women in top positions across companies can grow over the next decade or so? Urmi, I won't take this question to you. I want the men to probably answer it. And maybe, Sumit, if I can take it to you, please.
So let me share it with a live example, and it's something which people might find interesting. So our business is pro biking, as we call it. And this is, we sell two brands. There's an Austrian brand called KTM. And there's a Swedish brand called Husqvarna. And we market our bikes to people who are passionate bikers. They could be 18, 19-year-olds, and they go up all the way to 35, 40. And therefore, we create a lot of community engagement programs for our bikers, for the customers. You might be wondering, where am I heading? So I'm not digressing. I'm coming exactly to your point. So we create for our customers and for the community a lot of events, rides, tours, academies. How do you ride a bike in an off-road environment? How do you manage it on the track? How do you go for tours, and really tough tours like going even beyond Ladakh and all that? And for that, I have a team which organizes these programs. And these people are a mix of bikers and managers. But what is a more important skill in them is that, are they great bikers? Are they really passionate about bikers? Because that's when they would connect with those customers. And they would know that sport inside out. So these are people who follow biking as a sport. And at the ground level, I have got 4 young managers who handle this. Out of these 4, 3 are women. And they are passionate bikers.
Wow.
And they lead, and our customer base so far is such that we are 90% men and only 10% are women. But within that, I've got, out of 4, 3 are passionate women bikers who lead a lot of these biking initiatives. So I think it starts with the mindset. One would have conventionally thought that, why would I mean, it's a role which it's one of those few industries or segments or functions that you would say, oh, this is very, very male dominated. I believe if one can make a change in a function like that, you can make it at any level. I think some initiative is definitely required by the organization. Of course, removing all the elements of discomfort are important, like what Urmi talked about. So we'll not take it over there. The environment, of course, has to be very, very conducive. And then I think one has to take a few bold initiatives. And once you get the ball rolling on this, it moves very rapidly. So I think that's what I would expect organizations to do. Really go for the so-called, the last bastion where people would believe that, oh, this can be led by a woman, and make the change over there. And you will find everything else beginning to fall in place.
Okay, that sounds very exciting. The women in biking, and of course, there are a few that I know myself, and I can totally relate to what you're saying. Urmi, I'll just extend this point slightly wider and about the skill sets that are required. Let's just step back about 2 decades, and we saw what ICICI Bank, and I'm naming the institution because of what they did for women leaders in the financial services space. And I very clearly remember ICICI Bank mentioning this. One of the initiatives, I'm sure there were many more, one of the initiatives was that in the 30s, they allowed any woman an out-of-turn promotion kind of a thing. It was a very, very assisted kind of program, so that the years or the time that they had lost because of being the family way, that could be made up for them. What could be some of these that companies can do for tomorrow, so that then ultimately it could go back to the institutions, the management institutions as well, because they could be taught as case studies?
Absolutely. So I would say, Ashutosh, starting where it ended is, the organizations are taking a lot of steps, right? So, and most organizations in today's world are looking at the women leaders of future, just to go back to the previous question, because having that diverse mindset at a senior leadership level is helping organizations really grow faster than otherwise. So that's a proven thing, and data is talking about it, right? So organizations have got it, the senior leaders have got it. So most of the things that we are trying to do today are, figuring out what are those gaps. First of all, are there gaps, right? So the gaps could have happened because of a couple of things. One is what you said, that they could have lost some time period in between. Two could be that they could have been in jobs, the previous jobs that they have done, or their experiences may not have built certain skills. Third is that sometimes there are generic skills which comes with the nature in which a man or a woman works and have not been built. A very common one we talk about is networking, right? So men do a lot more networking in office compared to women, because women kind of would try to, if you have an after office kind of a conversation or this thing, women will try to wrap up, because as you mentioned, they're trying to always balance the things. So what we have done is identified some of those very critical areas where we see that there are areas to be developed, identified those, picked up the women who are perhaps the most potential ones to take up bigger roles, and trying to work with them. It's just not that training or leadership development can help from a management institute. I think a lot of mindset also, because the organizations will take 2 steps, but I do think that women also have to take 2 steps forward to be able to take some of the challenges, to be able to feel that I am ready to do it. So I had a lot of times challenges where there were ready women leaders to take up big jobs, and they refused it. They came back and said, hey, I don't, first of all, the confidence saying, hey, I'm not ready for it. And whereas maybe they were much readier than a lot of men who were really wanting to compete for the job. So first is building that self-confidence in them, saying, hey, you know it, and you can do it, right? And none of the jobs actually are so difficult that you will not be able to do compared to another colleague of yours who does. So I think instilling the self-confidence, the self-worth, and making them start to be ambitious enough to do some of these roles or jobs. Because if they take 2 steps backwards and say, hey, I don't think I'm ready for it, then it becomes a challenge for organizations, because we really want them to come forward. So that's maybe an area of building some of the leadership, executive presence, the leadership part of it, the confidence building, the networking abilities. A lot of us don't connect to the industry as much as a lot of our peer male colleagues. Those could be the areas, maybe, Ashutosh, I would bring up as the ones that maybe we can focus during some of the management education.
Okay, so there's another very interesting question, and this one for Vishal here. The question comes from Santosh, and it's a very valid question in our times that we live in. It says, in the VUCA world, is spending 2 years on an MBA good, or are short and to the point online courses better? Again, this is an online versus offline debate partly. And, how do we address the current challenges?
So I think our experiences suggest, in fact, indicates that, this is something that you obviously have a chat with all the students. A lot of them have been, working from home, online, the classes in the last 2 years. And automatically, when you ask them, what is it about the campus? What is it that you would like to experience? A lot of them would like to come back. And one of the big things that you look at in the context of management education or creating leaders of the future or business leaders of the future is not just about sitting in front of a laptop. I think it's about peer learning. It's about groups. It's about working together. It's about a lot of motivation. It's about presence. It's about working long hours and actually feeling okay about it, right? To give you an example, when you're in a campus and you're doing long projects and you got short, very stringent deadlines, students possibly working till 2 or 3 in the morning and actually enjoying the experience. Right now, you're working at home, or you possibly are working on the same project at home, and you look at this as a bit of drudgery of sorts, so looking at it as a little bit of a painstaking process. So automatically what I'm trying to highlight here is that a good management education, which is contributing to creating business leaders, it's about immersion. It's about the immersive experience. So I'm not saying that, obviously there are aspects that need to be looked at. If you look at offline management education as well, the fact is that progressive offline management education will also have to incorporate blended approaches to learning, making learning a little bit more 24/7 orientated, not necessarily sticking to the sage on the stage format. But the feedback that I have, when you speak to a lot of people, management education is much beyond essentially listening in a classroom or engaging in a classroom. It's a lot to do with personal transformation. It's a lot to do with personalization of the education. It's a lot to do with working with every one individual to be able to help them create their futures. So that's what my perspective on this whole thing is in this online versus offline debate as a whole. This, I guess, this other thing around the length or the duration that somebody's speaking about. I think, once again, coming back to the same point, an immersive experience, coming back to the same point about, this whole idea that, especially if you look at the Indian context, a lot of students in the Indian context are not, who are going in for an MBA, for example, are not necessarily very high in terms of experience. So automatically, their ability to think about or experience what's happening on the shop floor or possibly in the factory or on the boardroom requires more reflection. And automatically, that means that you require a longer time to be able to dig deep into and learn things from a multidimensional perspective. Of course, if you look at executive programs wherein you have participants who possibly have 8, 10, 12 years of experience taking up shorter full-time executive education, which we also have, for them possibly a 12-month or a 15-month would still be something that they can do with, or something that they can then help use for their own transformation. But I think there are pros and cons to both, to be honest.
Sure. Okay, let's go to Narayanan next. So the skills of tomorrow, that becomes very important, and how obviously the MBA institution prepares for it. Narayanan, you mentioned about the 4 or 5 various Ds that you mentioned. So how should the average student look to prepare for tomorrow? You mentioned those, you highlighted those points, but to get that, there's also a little bit of a challenge. Getting some of that in smaller cities may be a challenge. So how does one go about that, online as well as offline?
Well, that's a good question, and the answers are being thought about, and there are certain, I wouldn't call it formulas. There are certain things that are emerging in certain B schools that are happening, and here is our experience, my experience, and I'm going to share that. One, I think the curriculum should undergo a change. I think unless we start from there, are you going to have the same marketing 1, marketing 2, market research 1, market research 2, strategy 1, strategy papers, and go ahead and do this? Well, let's move. And let me put it this way. There is more content available for the student to learn outside the classroom than it ever was. During my times, 20 years back when I was doing my MBA, I leaned a lot on the libraries, on my professors, on my students for this. Now it's available. So how much can you segregate the portion that you need to know, which is the knowledge part of it, which to me largely can be attained through your online and other areas. Can you bring the experience part of it inside the classroom? Can you bring that as the key agenda, like Dr. Talwar also mentioned, as the central point of learning? To me, the part that I remember the most about my MBA, which I did long time back, is the fun that I had during the campus years. The solutions that we built for the case studies was not stressful like it is today, because it's life and death. Like, you do this for a client, you do this in real life situations. Whereas in a controlled environment, when it was a lot more fun, we did the same. So making people go through that experience in these schools, to me, is the answer. Having said that, that's not the complete answer, but that at least introduces you to that. Simulations help a lot. And I would think we need to take a lot of leverage from technologies. Today, I'll go beyond what I said, the AR, VR technologies, the augmented reality, virtual reality technologies gives you a lot more space that, small city, big city doesn't matter. It actually gives a lot more what Professor called as an immersive experience through digital technologies. I have been part of advising clients who are teaching nursing where there were no cadavers. It was digital, dummies from which they got to the minutest part of arteries that goes through the heart and things like that. So today, digital technologies can mimic, can augment that experience part of it that was not there for us before. I mean, that's a different context, not an MBA context. I'm just saying similar such simulations can be made in MBA schools as well. So my answer to this is start rethinking management education right from the curriculum, right from pedagogy, and it also starts with the mindset of the teachers. Are they the ones who are going to be getting into the immersive part of it? Are they going to be the traditional teachers who are going to say, I know it, you don't know it, so I'm going to tell you what you should learn? Or they're going to say, look, the world is changing and this is what you should have learned by now. Come, let's do some things together and I'll tell you a glimpse of how things are in the external world. Most important, are you giving them the confidence that they've been through it? So I see many people who we recruit largely from MBA schools, like in KPMG. One of the things that I see, there are a bunch of people who are very confident. They've perhaps never been through that situation, right? I mean, when you give them, they're so confident because maybe the institution from which they are coming has given them a glimpse of how that happens. It could be through lectures, it could be through projects, it could be through interactions with people, internships and other things. But the key word is, are you giving them the experience? Are you giving them the confidence?
Okay. So Sumit, when you look to hire, let's say a few years, you spoke about the women and the 3 or 4 women in the pro biking part of the business. When you're looking to hire some for, let's say, looking at leadership roles a few years down the line, how will you post-pandemic, has the thought process changed? How are you looking at it differently today compared to what it was yesterday?
So for one, traditionally what you would look for as a mind that thinks strategically, display of creativity, of course, a lot of it you take as hygiene, you expect that in people. But I would say the need for that has gone down a little bit in my pecking order. I would have revised my pecking order over the last about 2-3 years by looking at common traits amongst young managers who have done well on the business. So, and I would say there are 3 traits which I have seen often get repeated amongst young managers who have done well. And I look for indications of that. The first one is being a very fast learner. The fact that we are living in a period of change, you will always find ambiguity. While you might be working on a project, the reality is your manager or the leadership would be knowing as little about that whole project as you might. So there's nobody who can handhold, you anyways along the way. But right now the changes are being built on an extremely short, period in the background. So you need to be a quick learner. And I've seen some of the guys do that really well. New projects, new tasks keep coming on. These are the guys who are very good at jumping into researches. And within about a couple of days, 3 days, they pick up the right kind of courses. I've seen guys who jump into Coursera's and all. And I had a case where a guy had to work on something in the area of retail experience, which he had never worked on. And after about a week, he came and he talked, and he had met a few of the companies who were, doing work over there. He had done some online research. He had even taken a Coursera course on what is retail experience all about. And the guy could speak with a lot of authority. So I look for somebody who's a fast learner. Second, I look for result-orientedness even more than before. Now, result-orientedness has always been big on the industry side. But in a situation where you're working a lot by remote, I don't have a visibility on the process that a person is applying. I don't have, whatever we might try, the human connect is obviously a bit, diminished. So in that kind of a case, when you have less face time with your manager, what really matters is the end output that you are delivering. And I think even after the pandemic is over and gone, we are moving to an environment of flexible working. I mean, that's kind of here to stay, just a matter of time. So I think your end results become very, very important. As people work on projects, very often the brief changes, very often the environment changes, very often the project doesn't do well. But people who have attained quick success and quick results, even within a project that might have failed, have made a mark. And you know that, oh, this guy's done his stuff well. He knows it. I would definitely plug him into a next bigger, more strategic project. So I think result-orientedness to me is a second very important attribute that I would look for. The third would be in this whole era of technology, remote working, artificial intelligence, data, etc. I still find that the human connect, ability to empathize, ability to engage with other people becomes a very, very critical attribute. Especially if as a young leader, you're going to become like a change agent in a process that's undergoing some kind of a metamorphosis. You have a task at hand at trying to move the old horses. How you engage with people over there. I've seen people get a disproportionate amount of success on very good ideas just because they have worked very well with people. So I would look for traits in a discussion with somebody. And what I would look for is that not what he's telling me across the table, but have they demonstrated that in the past, whether it's in a personal situation, in a work situation, or as a student, have they shown something where they've demonstrated being a quick learner, being result-oriented, and third would be showing a great degree of empathy and human engagement.
Okay, so Urmi, when that is the kind a manager is looking, top management is looking at, how does the HR ensure that this can be institutionalized? We're still talking of the uncertain world and the youngsters coming out of the institutions.
Yeah, so I think, one of the other things I will add to what Sumit just mentioned was also maybe the flexibility. I mean, he did touch on it. The situation is such that the people also need to move very fast across different things that they are doing. So today's hiring is a lot more based on curiosity that you bring in, your agility that you are bringing in as a learner, and more from the traditional ways of just looking at your experience and just looking at what you bring in from an educational perspective to a lot of your behavioral areas, which will make you a fast learner and be able to do that. So on a similar line, when we are trying to look at broadening the horizons of hiring. Now, why I'm saying the broadening of the horizons is because you're no more looking at a set population for hiring for something, right? You're trying to broaden it and figure out that even people who don't come exactly from those areas, do they have the potential and the acumen to pick up things and learn faster? So maybe what we need to do in a world where all of us have seen the talent is becoming more and more difficult to get, can we open up the channels to look at more number of ways to hire people and then maybe groom and train them within the organization, rather than expecting people to come exactly with the same skill sets and with 20 years of experience and come to the industry, which was a norm for many years. The pandemic has also taught that the talent also today doesn't rest only in your metros, right? So you go beyond to a lot of local talent residing in many parts of the country, right? So as HR, I think number one, broadening the scope of looking at talent, which is from a skill set point of view, would we be very rigid, or can we look at more learnability and the potential to pick up things and fast learners who can pick up different things and different technologies or different functions? Number two, from just the scope of hiring, it's the locational part of it. Are you constrained only to the top few cities in India, or are you ready as an organization to go down and look at a lot of other tier 2, tier 3 and get of local talent from there who are today ready to do the job, right? So that's another enablement in terms of the people that we can reach out to, right? And the third is the way we start assessing people when we want to bring them in the organization, right? So move away from traditional just interviews on the core areas, make it a lot more case study based. We introduced a couple of years back a lot of case study based hiring in specific areas where we felt that just interviewing is not giving us the best. And also having group of people, even technology software guys together, because what you need is network and collaboration when they are on the ground. We don't need just individuals to work on their own. We need people to collaborate and work. So those assessment mechanisms would be the third one. That seems to be changing in today's world.
Okay, hope that also answers. There was a question from Amit Shambak, so I couldn't take that. So hope that answers. And Amit was writing, what are the top 3 skills? Well, he's got more than 3, along with an MBA degree to succeed to land a job in one of the best corporate houses. Well, Amit, I hope that answers your question. More than 3 skills for sure that we heard. Okay, I was just coming to you, Dr. Alvar. Please go ahead.
So I just quickly wanted to add to what Dr. Chatterjee was talking about. I think with technology-enabled democratization of education as well as the selection process when you're hiring, I think the onus is now on higher education institutions, including business schools, to integrate further with the industry. Not just look at sabbaticals possibly for academics to go on to other universities abroad, but they should also be looking at a lot of industry level exchanges, sabbaticals into the industry, industry people coming along and spending about 6 months working in schools. A lot of that kind of cross-pollination is very, very important. The other thing you would notice is that a lot of hiring or selection of students is happening through competitions. And, for example, the other day I was speaking to one of our alumni, Ankit Agarwal. He's the founder of Dare to Compete. And a lot of the competitions are actually now happening on online platforms. And the fact that that's one major mechanism for companies to be able to vet a lot of the skill sets that we're all talking about here. So I think at the same time, problem solving. So I think you'll have to be able to create centers within institutions, within business schools, in this case, for example, wherein you have a lot of relevant industry problems that are being solved by the students, by the faculty helping them, working on relevant issues, whether that be small scale, whether that be medium-sized enterprises, whether that be NGOs, it doesn't really matter. I think a lot of this is actually contributing to a lot of what I would call as improvements as far as employability is concerned at a later stage, irrespective of whether you want to be entrepreneurs or whether you would like to, move on to a corporate career. So a lot of change, and the onus is not just on the industry. The onus is on us as business schools as well to work together in this particular direction. That's what I just quickly wanted to add.
Okay, sure. That's a very valid point, because that's what I also wanted to come to and ask Narayan about. How do we improve, when I say, I mean India, the institutions as well as the industry, because this is something that has been talked about for a while, but still not up there for India's institutions as well as companies.
So you're talking about the specific skill sets that is required.
So the syncretization, if I may say so, the industry and academia connect.
So this is another classic question, right? Like, whichever part you live in, you say the other is not stretching their hands enough to reach. Like, if you are part of academic, you always think industry doesn't come to academia. And if you are in industry, you say they live in their own world and they don't reach out to us and all. So my view is, I'll tell you the plus and minus that I see. It is, in my view, though I'm part of the industry, I'm equally kind of, part of that story, should not expect the educational institutions to train the students for industry. It's the industry to decide how and what they should be training for their own. Instead, they should be looking at individuals, and like many people rightly put, I think we talked about that, Dr. Talwar talked about that, are they people who are smart enough to learn? I don't think increasingly the idea is for academic institutions to go and say, these are the requirements of industry, and then I will give them those kind of skill sets and more. I mean, in some sense, the academic institution should think one step ahead of industry and start thinking about what is it that is required. Because please understand that, let's take an engineering kind of a scenario. You recruit somebody and then they go through 4 years of education and then they join an industry. And you do your curriculum, you do your everything before those 4 years, depending on what the industry asks for them. So you're doing this in 2022, it's largely catering to the requirements of 2020 and 2021, you prepare the syllabus. So the student joins in 22, 26 is when he or she gets out of the curriculum and the world has changed dramatically. So are the education institutions doing any service by understanding the requirements of the industry and trying to incorporate in their syllabus? My answer is no. Are they processing it and understanding what is required? On the other hand, industry also should not be short-sighted, and if they can include academia in their learning and development process. I mean, it happens in certain parts of the world. Research doesn't happen within the industry. They actually crowdsource research to academic institutions, the bright youngsters who are a part of it, and in that sense, include them as a part of the process. That's not happening. Academic institutions, on the other hand, I mean, while I can't take names, I can give you some for illustration. So, what did ISB do different, and why is it that the IIM stand to learn a lot? ISB said, I will invite professors from industry. I will invite people from other parts of the world. So are we as academic institution leveraging industry a lot in my teaching learning process? Perhaps not to the extent that is required. So I would think you should let industry a lot more into academic institutions from this side of the table. And if I'm industry, I should let academia inside my learning and development process a lot more and research process a lot more than I'm doing today. If I do that, I see a big win-win. Let's get down. I'm a consultant, right? I look at costs and returns and bang for the buck and things like that. I see a big return on these investments. Imagine if I'm industry and I can crowdsource, like I said, about research and development and prototypes and all those things, the engineering designs from the academia. I do it a lot cheaper. And similarly, imagine the plight of, I work for the sector, so I know how difficult it is to get a good faculty, train them and retain them. Imagine I say like 50% of it is you get it, just like that from industry. All you need to do is have an enabling infrastructure. It's a win-win. It is not just in the long term, but even in the short term, it is going to give returns. It's just that we are not seeing it. So I would think extending, it's a cliched answer, but extending oneself to more of the other side is going to make the big difference.
Okay, so it takes two hands to maybe extend both the hands. That's important. It's very interesting, Narayan, the point that you made, because what you're trying to say is the how part to be addressed. How should that learning happen rather than, the others, the how, the different way that we have to. And this was exactly a little while ago, someone was mentioning that what to learn is probably less important and how we are learning, that is becoming very important. So maybe Urmi and Sumit, Urmi, if you'd like to go on about that first. How should that learning happen for tomorrow's world?
So a few things that I think we've been doing, and I think we need to continue to do much more, is maybe kind of partnering with the academia in terms of even curriculum that is needed for today and for tomorrow. So the industries have a fair idea where they're heading to, right? So at least partnering to some extent, and especially in very niche areas, which I remember a few years back, we partnered with one university in India for sensor technology, because we work a lot in the area of sensors and not many organizations were doing that. So we had somebody from our organization be a part of their advisory board, be a part of designing the curriculum. But I don't see that happen in most of the other technologies of the other areas. So it's happening, it's slow in progress. The other thing that we do today is we do a very thorough structured internship program, which starts at the third year of an individual, or the last semester that they do before they're out of the college. I think we have an opportunity to start much ahead of that. So if educational institutions are more open, and we do have in certain European countries, we see that from the first year, actually those people are ready to come and spend 2 days in a week in our organization or other organizations to just understand what is happening, be a part of the teams, project teams, work, etc. So if our curriculum start building that, into the modules, where you started with engineering as an example, a great example, where if from the first or second year, once the basic curriculum is done, if the industry gets an opportunity to start taking interns for shorter periods of time also, I think it just starts building the way we work in an organization, the challenges that we see. So I would say these would be the two top ones that we can do in the future to be able to be more proactive in this approach.
Sumit, the how part, how would you address that? And it's quite a wide question, I know, but if we can make it simple, you are the expert, so you can make it simple.
So it's I've always believed that every time the how is getting a little too confusing, or there's so many ways to go and you don't know how to get started, it's always best to narrow the focus, and that certainly gives you a direction. Now, what we all seem to be talking about, and I couldn't agree, I couldn't agree more with this, is that the industry and academia partnership is going to be a very critical ingredient moving forward for management education to continue to remain relevant. Obviously, I think, like Narayanan said, that partnership is, it's somehow not happened for whatever reasons, and both the sides could have enough to talk about the other side. I think what I would encourage institutes to do would be to find a few industry partners and not go very wide. And even for that organization, if they're partnering with an institution, it's not a transactional partnership of either just an internship or opening up some industry projects for a short-term project for 3 months or a little consulting project, but agree on a couple of areas which are important for their organization and which also translate into good management learning for the industry. And let that be a year-long partnership, maybe a 3-year-long partnership. And whether it is projects, whether it's internships, whether it's consulting work, that's where it becomes a basis for industry and organization to partner. And I think once that backbone is created, a whole lot of work arenas would emerge for students to actually do stuff rather than just reading it through case studies. So I think maybe, just having a few partners, but going really deep into it rather than going wide, can provide the right kind of a learning backbone.
Okay, there's another question coming on this is Yogesh on one of the streaming platforms. I referred to some of them. So one of those, this says, and this goes to Dr. Vishal, as we are in hybrid model these days, says Yogesh, I have experience in my peer group that soft skills at majority institutes, he says, are somewhat less important. I don't know what basis, but it seems like a generic question. Would you like to take this, Dr. Talwar?
So I think when we were speaking earlier about what kind of skills are essentially important for budding business leaders of the future, I think it's a combination. Wherein I think increasingly you would notice social intelligence, your ability to empathize, your ability to look at a problem from multiple directions, your ability to have good interpersonal capabilities. All these things are going to be rather important in a world wherein a lot of the mundane or the basic or the regular stuff can get automated, right? So why would you then exist? What differentiation would you be able to create? That means that, let's say, for example, if you're getting into, let's say specialization in finance, your ability to, match a balance sheet or create a profit loss statement will not necessarily be as important as your ability to then strategize and make decisions and convince people to move in a particular direction. So I think from my perspective, domain as well as soft skills will be equally important. I think, and it's not a question of 1 or 2 months towards the end you try and improve your softer skills. It's not that. I think it has to be a rigorous process right from the beginning. It's not just about a flash in the pan kind of an approach and hope that things work well in a placement cycle. If you have areas that you need to work on, you have to do that from day one. And it's not just for the softer skill side, it is also your domain knowledge, because I think going forward, as the democratization of selection processes happen, as Dr. Chatterjee was talking about, a lot of companies possibly may be spoiled for choice. Then as well, you have to be able to differentiate from a technical know-how perspective, as well as other aspects of leading people.
Very interesting point that you mentioned. One last question I had, Dr. Talwar, about, and Deepak Ori spoke about it, about the outlook that needs to be more global than before. How can institutions drive that mindset? Again, that needs to be pushed early.
Yes, absolutely. I think the way things are going, you'll have virtual teams, you'll get together, you'll work on a project, you'll then get dissolved and you'll work on to another project with teams you might never physically meet, to be honest. And that also means that your cultural dexterity will be important. That means your ability to empathize not only in one particular context like in India, but also understand issues and how they're being framed in another part of the world will be important. And good schools are obviously having a lot of collaborations, relationships to be able to enable a lot of that to happen, whether that be exchange, like in our case, we have exchange, we have immersion with a lot of good schools all over, to be able to then create that kind of an environment. Absolutely, it's quite important going forward.
Okay, thank you so much for taking out the time. And but since you made this point, Dr. Talwar, I have to mention this. And I tend to do that. Since you said it has to be the softer skills part, it has to be developed right from the early days. It's about being Sachin Tendulkar. If you want to be that, you have to start pretty early and you have that passion to do that. So I guess it's a little bit about learning from the life of the Master Blaster, as he was called. Thank you so much, everyone, for being with us. It's been wonderful speaking and wonderful talking about it. Thank you indeed, everyone. And I must mention Deepak Ori as well, because he's no more here. Dr. Urmi Chatterjee, Sumit Narayan Ramaswamy, and Dr. Vishal Talwar. Pleasure being with you on this platform.
Thank you to you and everyone here. Thank you
very much. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so
Take care.
much.
Happy birthday once again, Ashu.
See you. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.